Welcome to Act 3, the podcast where we explore how to thoughtfully shape the rest of our lives. I'm your host, Kara Gray. This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching service where I help executives and professionals plan their Act 3. For more information, stay tuned until the end. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Marlon Weems to the podcast. Marlon spent over 30 years in the finance industry, beginning in the early 80s in Little Rock, Arkansas. In the mid-90s, he founded the state's first African-American-owned asset management firm. Later, he acquired securities investments of Conway from St. Louis-based Mercantile Bank to found Weems and Company, the state's first Black-owned investment bank. He went on to hold several leadership positions on Wall Street. In 2012, he and his family moved to North Carolina, and he began his writing career as an expert in capital markets analysis. A few years ago, he started The Journeyman, a newsletter exploring the intersection of American culture, politics, and anti-Black racism. In addition to his newsletter, Marlon still takes on the occasional freelance project. In 2022, he authored a deep dive report on applications for blockchain technology and healthcare for the Boston Globe media. He is currently working on a memoir about his experiences in finance. Marlon lives on an island in North Carolina with his wife and 2 children. When he's not writing, you can find him on the beach or riding his bicycle up and down the island. Marlon, it's a pleasure to have you with me here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Kara.
Sure. So usually I talk to people about, what their schedules looked like pre-retirement and, what their life looked like and how crazy their world was. And you might win for like most dramatic story ever. And we don't have to tell it all. People need to subscribe to your Substack newsletter and get the whole scoop because you can go down the rabbit hole with that forever. But give us some of the highlights of life when you first were, having your asset management firm, and then when it became Weems and Company. I mean, it is a crazy story. I mean, FBI is involved at some point. And
Well, no spoilers, but as you said, I started off in Arkansas, and I think at the time, we're talking about the early 80s, there weren't that many minorities in finance, period, in the United States. And I think in Arkansas, I was one of maybe 4. And so in the entire state.
yeah,
And I guess, I started out in the mid 80s, and then 10 years later, I started my own business. The asset management business, quite frankly, didn't do that well because I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was kind of a workaround to be able to get some financing for my business. Um, I had the opportunity to acquire a small investment bank, the securities investments in Conway, which was basically the investment arm of a bank by the same name. And they were acquired by Mercantile Bank. And I just, was really kind of a flyer. I just said, I'm going to see what they're going to do with this little investment business that they clearly don't need since they're a big regional bank, and just kind of got lucky. And that's how Weems and Company was born. And, from there, I mean, it's a long story, but the short version is I had some trials and tribulations trying to run my business in a place where there really were no minorities, and I wasn't particularly welcome because I was kind of upsetting the apple cart. But after 5 years of running that business, I shut it down and moved to New York and went to work on Wall Street and spent a little over 10 years as a trader on Wall Street.
yeah. Tell me about those years. Those must have been crazy because all of a
Oh,
sudden you're
well,
into working a lot of hours, I would imagine.
yeah, I always did, but it's different certainly on Wall Street. I guess it's kind of like in baseball, going to the big show, so to speak. But um, I did know some people already when I got there, so it wasn't, um, like I was just sort of dropped into, a totally strange situation. But if nothing else, my timing is perfect. I got there just in time for the internet bubble to burst, and then a year later was 9/11, and
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
after that was the blackout and then the financial crisis. So plenty of stories for sure.
Oh my goodness. Um, Tell me about then what the transition looked like to North Carolina. Like, what made you choose that as a place to transition to, and where you're living your life now?
Well, there were a couple of things. One, I'm originally from Arkansas, of course, but we had talked about moving back to the South because I mean, I just sort of rattled off four kind of traumatic experiences, and
Yeah.
it's I guess for me, there's also a realization that technology was making my job obsolete. I mean, not exactly at that time, but you could kind of see it coming.
Hmm.
When I first got to New York, if a customer wanted you to buy or sell 10 different stocks, you might need, three or four guys to do that. And with the introduction of technology, it just became something you could do almost as an afterthought. And so, one guy could do it.
Yeah.
And so, you can kind of see where things were, or at least I could anyway, kind of see where things were going. And then with the financial crisis, I think to me the handwriting was kind of on the wall. I mean, I think 30,000 folks got laid off, maybe more, just Wall Street related
Yeah.
jobs. And so it just seemed like time. And my wife has a sister in North Carolina. So that was where we originally started. And we didn't really want to go all the way back to Arkansas. Um, and plus North Carolina has beaches. So so that was that.
That's good. And we must say too that you do not consider yourself retired at this point. You consider yourself semi-retired. So I think that's a
Yeah, because
distinction.
I mean it is different. I mean, I guess the difference for me is that well, I was working 70 hours a week in New York. And so I got no interest in continuing to do that, but I like to kind of keep it moving. So um, my writing kind of morphed from doing the capital markets slash subject matter expert stuff to writing more observational opinion stuff and working on the manuscript, which is in case you don't know it, writing a book is hard.
It is.
It's hard, and
No
it's
doubt.
you really have to spend a lot of time with it. So when I started, I thought I would be done by now and it would be on the shelves, but
Yeah.
um, I think I'm just under 40,000 words in, and I feel like I'm maybe halfway there. So
Okay.
so
Okay.
I probably need a good editor too. So,
Well,
but
that's always a good idea.
yeah, there's kind of a lot to tell, and in a way the way I'm writing is to certain, of course, tell my personal story, but also maybe a little bit of history is in there too. In terms,
Hmm.
I don't think a lot of people really know, for example, much about the sort of the rise of black and or firms owned by black people and people of color.
Hmm.
And I guess happened to be in that timeline of where a lot of those things were coming about. So I try to give some context in that regard, and it takes a little bit of extra effort when you're not just writing about something that happened to you.
Right.
So
No, for sure. And I had read an article where you were interviewed, and it was talking about how when you moved to North Carolina, you thought it might be, you know, easier than it was to pick up some Wall Street work still, or work in that space,
mhm.
and found that it wasn't. Do you want to share a little of that? I mean, we can bring it down
Yeah,
here. I
Yeah,
mean, it's real.
I thought, because when I left New York, I had spent, I guess, those last 5 years out of the 13 that I was there, I was actually running a trading operation that was pretty sophisticated, and I was, doing corporate buyback work for companies like Walmart and Microsoft, and my firm was, um, in most of those cases, the only minority owned firm that they were using, and because we were good. and
Yeah.
uh, and so with that sort of, I guess, background, I thought, well, um, I'll probably end up living in Charlotte because that's where all the, capital markets firms are kind of, in the South anyway, are located. And it didn't work out that way. I mean, I I think I have this sort of, my wife and I have this test that we do on why things happen the way they do, and it's called the lowest common denominator.
Okay.
I'm not good at math, but that's kind of, and you just try to eliminate the reasons why something may or may not be happening. And I think in my case, part of it was, and you can never really quantify it. I think there was maybe some sort of a racial aspect to it, but
Yep.
at the same time, I was 54 or 55. And I think that might have had just as much, if not more, because it's a young man's game for sure.
Yeah.
But and if you're in and you're 54, that's one thing. But when you're trying to get in and you're 54, maybe it's a difference. And I would see where, because I knew I had the resume, and I think too, part of it, it may be a, I don't know how you quantify it, but the hiring managers didn't have as much experience as I did for, some of the roles that I was looking at.
Yeah.
And so if I were them, maybe I would be hesitant to hire my potential replacement, if you look at it that way. But yeah, all of those things I would see where, my LinkedIn page, you could see that somebody's looking at it and kind of where they're from. And it, suddenly the interest would just kind of, go away. And so uh, all those things, it's kind of serendipitous. I mean, I didn't really resist it that much because I just kind of figured I know enough that I can sort of, hustle and make something happen myself. I don't necessarily want that structure again anyway. So that's kind of how what got me into writing. I got the opportunity to start doing white papers and that sort of thing for a capital markets uh, firm in New York, and that was really what started me down the path of being a writer, and and using, learning a methodology to kind of um, sort of test my theory, or if you will. And so yeah, that was 10 years ago, and now I think I've kind of got it to, sort of that sweet spot of where it doesn't feel like I'm really working that hard. but I can but
Yeah.
I can still keep the lights turned on, and I can kind of do my thing, go to the beach like I'm going to do today, and
Yeah.
and just kind of um keep my blood pressure down.
Yeah. No, that's a goal for sure. But, ageism is real. And a lot of my clients, I have, the goal isn't to stop working entirely.
Hmm.
The goal is to maybe pivot and do something where you have a bit more of your time. And that's something what they encounter. But when you add racism on top of that, it's not an easy path. So I applaud you for, being persistent and taking a positive attitude towards that. That's amazing. For those of you who don't know, I worked at a DEI consultancy for the last few years, and racism is live and well.
It's a thing.
It's a
It's a
thing.
thing.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about, because you do write about anti-racism?
Sure.
If you want to talk a little bit more about,
Well, I can tell you,
solutions.
you
Yeah.
know, if Solutions, I don't know if I'm smart enough to have
Yeah.
the solution or if there is even a solution, but
Yeah.
one of them, certainly one is like what we're doing right now is talking about it. I
Yeah.
think part of the problem that, we kind of have this, divided country. I'm not sure it's
Yeah.
50-50 divided, but there people don't want to talk about what's right in your face,
Yeah.
the whole. So that's something that I think would go a long way. And also just kind of acknowledging that it exists
Yeah. I
because
mean,
yeah,
white people can say they're racist all day, and I can say this because I'm white. But until you actually acknowledge that you have privilege and advantages because of that, things are not going to change. And you also need to be aware of that in everything that you're doing, how you work, how you operate, and recognize that it's different. It's a different situation, and you should, you know, just be aware and help other folks out.
so I can tell you, I'll give you a personal story. Now,
Yeah.
this was I guess in the mid 90s when I started this, when I decided to go out on my own.
Hmm.
And this is the kind of thing that would probably never happen to you.
Yeah.
Maybe because you're a woman, perhaps there'd be something like this. But when I started my firm, I knew there was some office space that I had my eye on. I had a friend, a young lady that happened to be white, that we'd gone to school together, and so we were pretty tight. And she showed me this space, and it was in what was well, still is the tallest building in the state of Arkansas, which isn't saying much, but it's Arkansas, right? So I looked at it and it was perfect, and I could kind of see, okay, yeah, this is the image that I want to, put. Yeah, and, I don't want to start a business and I'm trying to say I'm an investment guy and I'm operating in a strip mall, right? So you've got to be
Right.
in the right place.
Absolutely.
So um, so I went through the whole process, and in the back of my mind, rightly or wrongly, I thought, if these people see me, there's no way they're going to rent me this space. So I just allowed her to do all my negotiation. They knew everything about me. They knew the firm that I worked at, and because of where I worked, they just assumed I was a white guy.
Right.
Okay. And so fast forward to, I signed the lease, everything's set. My move-in day rolls around, and one of my brothers was with me, and we were just showing up to get ready to start moving in stuff, right?
Hmm.
And the building manager showed up to welcome us, and as soon as she got off the elevator, I knew we were going to have a problem. And they tried to back out of the lease. They didn't have a
Wow.
reason. And we had to threaten legal action. I mean, this took 2 or 3 hours because when she showed up, it was like suddenly she said there must be a there must be a mistake. And
Listen,
so
there's no mistake.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's just like a one of those things. I mean, I've had when I was setting that business up, buying office furniture, um, you know, I'd sort of gone into a bunch of my savings and was setting up bank accounts and doing all these things, right? I mean, now
Yeah.
you can do a lot of it electronically, but back
Yeah.
then you had to show up with cash and or a cashier's check.
Yep.
And and I had a guy at a furniture store refuse to sell us, like, we're buying 10 conference room chairs, and they refused to to sell them to us because they thought the money was like illicit drug dealer
Yeah.
money or something. And it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, so crazy stuff. I mean, that's the thing. Racism it doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time, but
No.
those are things that happen, and why does this guy think I'm a drug dealer? I'm wearing a suit. Why would he think that? So yeah, those are some things that I'm sort of weaving into the book I'm working on. But it's and those things. I mean, that certainly was a a few decades ago. But I mean, I'm sure I'm no different than any other person of color, and these things just kind of are persistent, if you will.
Yeah. I'm glad we're talking about this. This is now a different podcast, but I don't care because it's
Well,
important.
that's
Yeah.
what happens when you get an old black guy on your podcast.
I found you, Marlon. So
I can
listen.
talk about age or we can talk about racism. It's your call.
Yeah. No, all good. I'm glad we spent a little bit of time on that. Obviously, um, that subject is near and dear and something that needs to get. I don't know what needs to happen in this country. I have hope for the next generation. I don't know if you do, but
I do.
or a
Yeah.
few generations. Yeah, I feel like they are understanding
I've
that
got
we are.
I've got a daughter that just turned 20 this summer, and I have a son that's he'll be 18 in a couple of months, so he's a high school senior.
Mhm.
And we've been just so fortunate because they're both really sharp kids. My daughter is today is her first year or first day rather, um, as a junior at one of the North Carolina colleges, and so they're, I mean, just really sharp. They know a whole lot more about what's going on, just in terms of current events and the the state of play, I guess. I mean, I was just wandering around trying to figure out how to, you know, get to the next party or something. I wasn't thinking about politics when I was
Yeah,
20, you know, so I
yeah,
think that speaks well of that generation. I think is just really they have because they've really, if you think about it, they've experienced nothing but one upheaval after another. If you're 20, you're on, I guess, what, the backside of 9/11, and then just there's never really been just a truly great time for them. So
no, there
that's a
hasn't
story.
been, and that's awful. I mean, it feels like the world is on
Yeah.
fire right now a little
Well,
bit.
and
So
it kind of is. I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah. I
another
mean,
another
literally,
story, different
yeah.
podcast.
That's another podcast
But
we could.
yeah, I mean, but they see what's going on around them, and I think a lot of them, certainly not all, but a lot of um, Gen Zers, I guess, they're just um, ready to take action. I think so.
Yeah,
You know, hope there's hope.
there is hope. There's always hope. So speaking of your kids, you are writing a memoir, which will be part of your legacy. Um, are you thinking about other things in terms of legacy? Because that's something that folks think about as they
Yeah. Well, part of, I guess, the writing, if you looked at any of, the stuff I've written,
Mhm.
I even though I may be talking about something going on in the economy, a lot of times I'll weave in a personal story too. And I guess I was looking the other day, and I think I've written maybe 100 essays on different things, and there's a lot of personal stuff there that hopefully my writings will stick around after I'm gone, and my
Yeah,
kids can have, that's, to me, that's kind of a piece of me that I can leave behind.
no, for sure. Um, your Substack is worthy. It
Thank
is
you.
worthy. I only just scratched the surface because I started on it a couple days ago and then I read more yesterday. And there's a lot in there to learn from you and to learn about, period. So tell people how they can find it and how they can find you.
Sure, it's on Substack. I think it's the journeyman.substack.com, I think. But if you just go to substack.com and search me, or Marlon Weems, or the Journeyman, it's pretty easy to find. And they actually have an app now that has
Oh,
sort of a Twitter functionality in part of it, and that's really I used to be pretty active on Twitter, and it's just kind of gotten so bad lately
yeah.
that it's just not even worth. I just don't. I don't want to use social media to get mad,
No,
and and uh, eh, and now that it's called X, I mean, it's just really not uh, the same platform anymore. So I'm on Twitter, but I rarely post there.
yeah,
So if you can find me on Substack, and I think in my LinkedIn there's a link that it's one of those link tree things that has like a lot of all my social media, as well as sometimes I'll put some of the most recent things that I've written in there that you can kind of get a sampling.
perfect.
So, so
Yeah.
yeah, that either one of those, I'm not hard to find.
No, I found you. And I will put links to both the Substack newsletter so y'all can subscribe, and also a link to your LinkedIn to get to everything else. Marlon, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this chat with you, and I'm glad we got into it a little bit.
Yeah, same here, same here, and thanks for inviting me.
This podcast is sponsored by Good Morning Freedom, my retirement coaching firm. I help executives and professionals plan the non-financial part of their retirement, like how to discover new purpose and how you want to spend your time. I offer a one-on-one coaching retirement blueprint package where we work together to discover some new avenues of exploration for your Act 3. This coaching is completely custom and will provide you with a ton of resources and support as you transition to this new stage of life. For all the details, please go to goodmorningfreedom.com/services.